Oh,
What's goody?
it's funny because I'm looking at the comments on Instagram, but we are broadcasting live. So we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. What's going on, everybody? Rakim Sabri here. I cover financial trauma and financial empowerment for people who look like me. And I have with me Coach James, who's going to break down. We're going to have a good conversation today. This is the second in a series of talks that we're doing for Financial Wellness Month. You can find us at this same time, 6 p.m., for the following two Tuesdays. Through the rest of the month, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different things, but namely the merging of the minds as it relates to budgeting and financial wellness. James, why don't you introduce yourself to the crew and we can get started?
All right, hopefully you can hear me. What's going on, y'all? My name is James Huntley. I go by Coach James. I've been budgeting and been a budget coach for now going on 2 years. So I'm very excited to be sharing uh, some of the things that have helped me in my life when it came to budgeting, wisdom, finance. And so, yeah.
And we are, give me a second. We're navigating new technology, guys, so bear with us. We're using a combination of three different devices. We're using the computer on my end, my computer camera, so I'm streaming in three different places. We're using my phone to stream on Instagram. James is using his phone to stream on Instagram, and James is also using his computer camera. So to improve the quality of your experience, what we have to do is mute ourselves when the other one is talking, and so there might be a slight delay between us making our points. Uh, what else did I want to share? Also, we are doing this series for a reason. I was going to kind of wait to the end to do this, but I'll repeat it multiple times throughout our session. We are doing this series to raise awareness around a project that we're working on, where again, we're combining our expertise, the things that we're good at, the things that we don't necessarily want to touch. So James is good with numbers. He's going to get into all that today. He loves budgeting systems. I understand the value of talking about budgeting, but I'm more passionate about the mindset and human psychology as it relates to money and particularly financial trauma. So we decided to do a financial wellness series that will turn into a financial wellness course slash workbook. And we have a link available if you are interested in joining our waitlist, where you would just give us your name and your email. Or you just keep tuning into these lives because we're going to keep having them and pushing this project. So James and I are just going to have a conversation. It's not going to be a lecture by any means. I think we kind of learned that lesson the last time we talked. Um, but I was having a pre-conversation with James before we decided to do this live as we were picking what topics we wanted to talk about. And I thought that there's a lot of people in my audience who don't know who James is. I'm sure there's a lot of people in James' audience who don't know who I am. So we thought that it made sense to kind of take a step back, introduce ourselves, why we decided that we wanted to specialize in the areas that we do, and talk a little bit about our stories as kind of the anchor behind this work. I know that in today's age, it's trendy to be a finfluencer, and people make money for doing this work inauthentically or without really a passion or kind of a driving force behind it. It's trendy. And that's not the case in our instance. So we want to talk about the stories that anchor us to show up, to do this work, to get educated, and to educate you all. So I'm going to hand it over to James and let him introduce himself and talk about why he decided to pick budgeting as his specialty area. James, go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't, I think both audiences don't know a ton about me. So I'm really happy to share. So I grew up in a small town, wasn't extremely poor, from Winston-Salem, or this small town, Walkertown. That's maybe 15 minutes outside of Winston-Salem. And all of my childhood, uh, it mainly consisted of me playing sports. Like that's what, from probably about 5 to all the way up until about 18, I was huge into basketball, huge into sports. And while I was playing those sports, I learned some great lessons. Uh, I learned the importance of like winning, importance of the harsh feeling of losing, and I think that has played a part into my drive today. Also, in my childhood, I was very church oriented, so I went to church every Sunday. God was a heavy part in my life, as well as my family. They were always really supportive of anything I was doing. If I was, you know, um, playing sports, they would show up to that. If I was interested in, I was like doing engineering stuff, they would be interested in that. So whatever I was interested in, they were really, really interested in. So that kind of carried me into another portion of my life, which was engineering. So on one side, you have sports, me playing basketball, doing cross country, things like that. And then you have the nerdy side of me, you can say. So at a very young age, I used to play with Lincoln Logs, Legos, and then I really started getting introduced to engineering. And I found out really, really quick that I was good at math. And from there on, and the reason why I felt like I was good at math, because it's like numbers just made sense. Like 1 + 1 was always going to equal 2. Like there was no like debating it. And so when I was younger, I really struggled with reading and comprehension and dissecting poetry and all this other stuff. So I knew numbers was my thing. So now, even as I am here today, uh, going into budgeting, like the numbers just make sense, right? You receive a certain amount of money, income, you spend a certain amount of money, and you have an amount that's left. So I knew at a very young age, like numbers, math, engineering was my thing. So middle school, went to an engineering and technology school. High school, also went to an engineering and technology school. So that I started focusing in on civil engineering. So I currently am a civil engineer, for those who don't know. So as well as being a budget coach, I work for a company, and I basically plan and design a bunch of things. And so that's where I kind of find the importance of planning, the importance of laying out your foundation and all those important things before uh, it actually gets built or constructed. So planning also plays a big role as to why I like helping others budget and plan out their finances, because the two industries overlap a ton. So enough about the nerdy stuff, the kind of the math and the numbers, but another big portion of who I am is being a cool Black African American male. And so I am the type of person who like has to look good. Like I have to kind of be that guy. And males know exactly who I'm talking about. So this started like really in high school. So I was definitely a top athlete, and I wanted I wanted to have the nicest clothes on, and I wanted to have the most beautiful young lady to be with. So all of those things were really important to me, as well as uh, just becoming like a higher value person, like just being dominant in everything that I did. And so this is really, really crucial, and something that I see that a lot of other African American males uh, aspire to be like. Like, we want to have on nice clothes. We want to have on. We want to have these nice things, and we want to represent something uh, that represents wealth, riches, a bunch of money, and kind of like fame, so to speak. And so this is something that really, really plays a huge role in finance, decision making, budgeting. And I want it to be that the person who looked good, kept himself up, had everything going for themselves, but I didn't want to be broke doing it. So I didn't want to be the type of person who uh, was flexing and trying to show off. I don't that wasn't the type of person that I was, and I didn't want to be unwise. So I had this kind of demeanor about myself uh, from the beginning, but I didn't want to do it in a form where I'm blowing a bunch of money and making a bunch of irrational decisions. And I think that's something that I see within our community, and it really frustrates me, and it's something that I strive to share with others. So I'll get into kind of that. That was my high school kind of story background, but I'll get into going from high school to college, and how I noticed that kind of frame of thinking, that mindset of planning, of not wanting to look nice and to have nice things, but not to be broke, played into my college lifestyle. So I go to college, go into engineering, and then, within my community, there are fraternities and sororities and, you know, things that I was able to join that represented that. And so I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. For those of you who don't know, we are the frat that represents high achievement. So what people sometimes see with the fraternities and the frat lifestyle is just luxurious lifestyle where, you look nice, you have all these nice things, you have all you represent having a bunch of money and all these things. But what they don't tell you is all the things that you're not seeing, like uh, the bills that are coming in, the debt that you may be getting yourself into with these student loans, some of the financial decisions that you have to make, and the pressure that comes with having this lifestyle and not being broke. And so um, I just remember countless amounts of parties and just fun interactions that I had with my fraternity brothers, with people on campus. And we did so much, but I thought I was, one of the coolest people. But during this time, I had a 1992 Volvo. So most people, if you look up what that car looks like, most people wouldn't say that is something that looks really nice, and people are interested in. So go through that, and as time goes on, I end up graduating and moving on, and basically getting into the real world. And my decisions from college allowed me to, I was wise then. I was saving some of my money. I was also working in school. and had internships and things like that. So I was budgeting while I was in school to be able to come out debt free. But once I graduate, everything changes. Because I'm an engineer, because I've graduated in the engineering space, I start making all these financial decisions. Buying a new car, get a new apartment, I get a new phone, I get new furniture, I do all these things, and I put myself in a ton of ultimately debt. Not a ton of debt, but enough debt to call it debt, right? And to have to pay back. And some of these financial decisions bothered me because I'm like, I was, debt free, and engineering, it doesn't seem like I had this false narrative that if I was an engineer, I would be rich. If I was an engineer, I would have all this money. But a lot of expenses started coming out. A lot of bills had to be paid. A lot of things. Basically, I'm saying my finances was eaten up very, very quickly because of the financial decisions that I made. And this made me become aware and be like, wait a minute. It just made me kind of slow down, stop, and say, okay, what am I missing? Or what do I need to continue doing? And that thing for me was budgeting. I needed to make sure that I was still incorporating budgeting. And that looked a lot different than it did in college because my expenses were a lot different. I wasn't taking on all these new things, as well as it made me start diving into financial education. And Rakim, if you want to interrupt me, feel free to.
I'm enjoying you give the background of your story because I think it's important for people to hear like that side of it. So what's fascinating to me about your story, and I like how you honed in on you said the cool black guy, cool African American black guy, is that like our points of origin were very different, but the influences culturally were very similar, right? So like you placed emphasis on wanting to be flashy, wanting to look good, wanting to feel good, wanting to be the most well kept. You use high value, and I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I was like, oh man, here comes that high value talk. Where's Kevin Samuels at? But
oh God.
But I think when I'm listening to your story too, I'm not hearing the started from the bottom, now we're here narrative that is often portrayed in the space. I certainly talk about my experiences, my negative experiences with money growing up, or rather the influence of those negative experiences on my beliefs around what was possible with money. And it sounds like that wasn't a part of your narrative. So as we were kind of talking offline before broadcasting, I thought it was important to introduce that and share that with the audience. We're coming from two completely different ends of the spectrum, but have ended up in the same place. And I'm not going to shout out your age because that's your business, but I will say that where James is in terms of his age today is where I was when I decided to become conscious of money and starting to make a lot of the decisions that I made around goal setting, around buying a house, around budgeting, around building credit. And so I'm just like, you've gotten to this point much quicker than I have, and so I'm excited to see what the future looks like for you. So for the people who, and I'm broadcasting on all my platforms, so I'm sure everybody knows who I am and knows my story. But for the people that don't, my name is Rakim Sabri. I guess my claim to fame started back in 2019 actually 2018 when I published my first book, Mentorship. And then 2019 followed that book up with Financially Irresponsible. that was published the day before I delivered a TEDx talk on financial empowerment. So that's where really I started to kind of like broaden my, we'll call it personal brand. And people started to kind of pay attention and say, hey, like, who is this guy? What's he talking about? That's some good stuff over there. And after I delivered my TEDx talk, I had profile done on me for Black Enterprise magazine. And that was like my first media mention. And I'm like, all right, like, let's get this show going. And since then, it's just been nonstop. But I talk about in the TEDx talk, in the book, in the beginning of this kind of journey on podcast and what have you, this concept of aspiring to be poor. And what that meant was that I didn't necessarily want to be poor, but I wanted to do the things that I saw other people doing, and really another person, specifically my mom, doing to survive, right? So I was conscious of the fact that we had food stamps. I was conscious of the fact that we had Section 8. And so I was like, oh, when I'm of age, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get food stamps, I'm going to get Section 8. And, I'm just going to live life. Drastic change in my environment and the influences and what I was exposed to as far as what was financially possible for me. And fast forward to 2016, I closed on a duplex. So I'm going from one side of the spectrum, thinking that when I become financially independent as an adult, that I will move into an apartment with Section 8 to help pay my rent, to the other side of the spectrum, going into home ownership before 30. And a lot of the transformation in that mindset came from education, came from influences that, to make it very plain, did not look like me, right? I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I participated in several of the Rich Dad courses and in-person and online seminars. And I wasn't aware of any other Black personal finance creators. And content creator is like the new buzz phrase. But before that, there was just the money people, right? So you had the Dave Ramseys, the Susie Ormans, the Robert Kiyosakis, sometimes, what's this guy's name? Tony Robbins would jump in and talk about money. But I didn't see the people that I could name off today, right? The Ash Cashes, the Tiffany Aliches, the Rich and Regular guys, like all of the Rakim Sabri's, right? I created that lane for myself because I didn't see myself in the audience, or rather doing this work. So when I look at the work that James is doing, and I look at the work that I'm doing, and I look at the work that so many others who look like us are doing with our audience in mind, I think it's super important to show variety in the background experiences that have led us to this point. And so, and I know you didn't get into like all the details, James, but you talked a lot about your life from a position of, I don't want to say ease, but financial security. That's kind of what I gathered, right? You went from sports town, sports community, church community, a lot of support on that end, going into school, joining the fraternity. You talked about, loving math and not really loving the other sciences, right? Writing, poetry, those kind of things, which I always excelled in. And and now you're here, you're an engineer, and you're creating content for you're a Black content creator who's creating content around budgeting based off of your experiences with budgeting. And before I pass, or as I pass back the mic to you, I want you to I'm putting you on the spot. I want you to tell everybody what you told me yesterday about what you believe about money. Yesterday you made a statement and I was like, wow, you definitely got to drop that one. So go ahead and drop that one for the audience.
Yeah, so we were talking yesterday, and I'm just a firm believer on not, spending my money on dumb shit. That's pretty much what I said yesterday. Like, I am not a big fan of, my money on just stupid stuff. And when I say stupid stuff, to each his own. Everybody has their own, ideas. They're going to spend their money however they want to. But I find that when you are spending half of your paycheck or large sums of money on crazy stuff, and I call crazy stuff like the club. Um, it could be gambling your money. It could be doing just whatever with your money. Your money can go like crazy, but yeah, I really don't believe in irrational spending, and so that kind of brings me to another point. Right after I had graduated, I haven't always thought like this. Like I've been wise, I feel like, but once I graduated from college and I got into the real world, I I really had this kind of cloud or bubble over my head, and thought that engineers like coming out would basically I was rich. And that's kind of the idea that I had in my head. And so once that reality kind of clicked, and I was like, this is not the truth. Like the amount of money that I have is not like a crazy amount of money. Um, it made me bitter. It made me very, very bitter, and I was angry for probably the next year or so. And I literally took out like my frustration, my anger, and I didn't channel it negatively and start doing craziness, but started looking into financial education. And Rakim, you mentioned, the rich dad, poor dad, and I started looking at the 4 hour work week and Think and Grow Rich and all of these different books that really opened my mind to kind of think differently. I'm like, why? And this once I started reading these books, it started making me even more angry. So I knew I had kind of some of the concepts and the organization right with money. But when I started doing a really deep dive and found that, this information is not taught in schools. It's not something that people in our community are talking about, right? When just being honest, when my family gets together or I'm with my boys, like we're talking about either women, talking about smoking, we're talking about what else? Not really. It's not really a bunch of intelligent money conversations. We're cooking out, we're eating good food, but a lot of these concepts are just not incorporated into the conversations that we're having. So this frustrated me even more, and it got me into financial literacy. It got me into talking about money, and then talking about things that I felt more confident about. So specifically budgeting, because I found that budgeting had worked for me. It was actually talked about in my home. My parents, they were good budgeters. So the fact that I was taught it, but then the conversations I was having, I mean, this stuff helped me. And I'm like, okay, I've had some support. I'm now debt free. I feel wise. I see the benefits of budgeting, but I'm looking on social media and I don't see anybody talking about budgeting. I'm on YouTube and there's, some people, there's these finance gurus and some of them are talking about money, but you literally have to be searching for this information. It's not pushed to you on social media. And so that really, really frustrated me. So that is where some of my drive comes from when it comes to content creation, uh, making sure that I bring this type of information about income, expenses, subscriptions, uh, some of these simpler terms, information, so that people can start seeing this stuff within my community, and they can start implementing some of these things and becoming capable of doing these things. So that really is, it kind of pushes my passion for budgeting, and is a major reason why I am like, I'm all in on the topic, and really want to dissect some of these other things. And I think that's why me and Rakim, I connected with him, even though he didn't even probably know it, because there were things that, so we went to this conference called FinCon. And this is a conference where a bunch of different creators, they come together and they talk all things money, all things finance. So I'm like, I'm now in a community where everyone's talking about budgeting, talking about finance and money. So he was talking about financial trauma and things that involve more of the mind and the decision making. And so this is something that I had no clue that had affected me. Having like these, like a poor mindset, just different things that you don't even know affect you. And so being in that environment has even inspired me more to continue the conversations, to continue the education, and to not only do that, but bring awareness, to partner with people who are, know a lot about this stuff, but to also focus in on the numbers side of things, because that is the portion that I feel comfortable talking with, and not only talking with, but I really am excited to be helping others. So I kind of started testing some of the things that I had been doing, because it's one thing to, talk about budgeting and educate people about finance and money, and then not be doing it yourself. So everything I'm teaching, everything I'm putting out there, I try to make sure that I am a follower of those tips and that information, because that is huge. It's kind of like a pastor, and they'll they may say one thing but do everything against what they're saying behind closed doors. So I'm not that type of person, but I also wanted to start helping others with it. And so that's where I really found inspiration and excitement, because I found that, okay, I can get this information to my community, but now I can really zone in and work one-on-one with people who are looking to get control over their money, or they're looking to delete subscriptions, or they're looking to figure out ways how they can balance out all these extra bills that they have coming in, or just plan better, or whatever it may be. So I started working with individuals, and keep in mind, this is a little after, it's maybe a year after COVID. So I would say, yeah, I've been going at this for now 3 years. But to be able to work with people one-on-one, to see them changing some of their habits, getting more organized, cutting down subscriptions. There was one person I work with, and it's been awesome to work with these people. But just within one setting, they were able to decrease like over $1,000 just in monthly subscriptions. So I thought that was literally insane, just from an hour conversation of just going back and forth with them and catering to whatever they had going on. So as we talk about our stories, our background, budgeting is super important and crucial for me, because it allows me to help people get from point A, unorganized, maybe not even unorganized, maybe just unaware, maybe not having the proper resources, not seeing this information on social media. Maybe it's some of those things, to getting them to a point where they are financially secure, like you mentioned before, or financially confident. So that's where my passion comes from, and that's why I am going all in on this budgeting thing.
And I'm gonna say something that's probably considered blasphemy in the personal finance education community, but I hate talking about budgeting. Like, it is my least favorite topic to educate on. Doesn't mean I can't educate on it. It's not fun for me. It's boring. And if I feel that way as a financial educator, I can imagine that many people who are not financial educators feel the same way. It's a tedious task a lot of the times. It's boring a lot of the times. And especially if you're not aware of the different budgeting styles, which, James could talk about more in a minute. It just seems like a task that you want to skip over to get to the good stuff, to get to the fun stuff, to get to the sexy stuff, like investing, like, starting a business, like paying yourself first, and, all of those other things. When I think about the amount of time that I've spent in financial education and financial coaching, the number one question that I've received over these years is, what should I invest in? Like, off rip, I mean, I've had people slide into my DM, didn't introduce themselves, didn't say hi, good morning, good afternoon, like nothing, just what should I invest in? And so when I think about foundation and the need for foundation and the need to maybe shine more of a spotlight on foundation, like budgeting, it helps solve some of the problems that people will come to you with that might relate to, well, I don't have enough money to invest, right? I don't make enough money to do this, or I have too much debt to do that. And so budgeting is not just about creating this. I mean, it is, but it's not just about creating this system that says, here's what's coming in and here's what's going out. It's about understanding the system that you create that says, what are my spending patterns? Where am I allocating priority in the money that I do make? And understanding that for every hour that I'm trading in exchange for money, how is that, what is the maximum impact, rather, that I can create based off of the salary that I do bring home? And so there's this phrase that's often, said in the personal finance community around, it's not about how much you make, but how much you keep. And I believe that that's true. But as we approach this topic, and, it really is a wonderful clash here, or rather a wonderful union here. I don't want to say clash. As we approach this topic of financial wellness as a whole, and looking at financial psychology, financial therapy, and financial trauma as being a roadblock to prevent people from executing good money behaviors like budgeting, it allows for me to look at what is it that James is trying to put out into the world to encourage people to do the thing that they should be doing, right? To establish these systems, to execute on those established systems. And how do I look at that through a lens of empathy, right? So if we're talking about, if we make a blanket statement, I'm not picking on you, James, I promise, but we make a blanket statement like, I don't believe in spending money on dumb shit, and then we go and we validate that statement in front of an audience who might say, well, that's not dumb to me. Like, that makes me happy. That helps me get through my week. That helps me gets me through my day. How do we approach a conversation like that with empathy? How do we draw a line between what accountability looks like and what no judgment looks like? And so when we're doing this work, and I'm about to give another commercial, but when we're doing this work and creating this course and creating this book that we're working on, there is a lot of back and forth between, well, this is the approach that we should take to an audience of people who work a 9-to-5, versus this is the approach that we should take to an audience of people who are entrepreneurs, or this is the approach that we should take to an audience of people who work a 9-to-5, but their expenses exceed what it is that they're making. How do we then have a reframe of that conversation where we can be sensitive to the different realities that people are experiencing and still cover all the bases. So when we talk about creating content around budgeting, that includes, well, limiting those subscriptions that James was talking about. We also understand that there's only so many expenses that you can cut before you have a situation where you need to make more money. So looking at that fact, we have a section in this course that we're creating that talks about, well, how do you increase your income? It's not enough just to decrease your expenses. We have to figure out how to increase income. We also will look at, well, what do you do with that income now that you've increased it, right? So you stop buying the venti caramel frappuccino, right? Caramel punch frappuccino with 6 pumps of caramel and extra crunchies, right? Well, you stop buying that once a week or 5 times a week. What are you doing with that extra money that you have now? Are you spending that somewhere else? Are you investing that? Are you saving that? And so it creates more of a awareness around where your money is going, how much money you're making, how much money you're spending passively, right? So Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, Apple Music, whatever, the gym, whatever other subscriptions that you might have, and make you look at money from a place of intentionality. So yes, that was my passive way of giving another commercial. The reason why James and I have joined forces and have started to do these live streams every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern is because we are in the process of creating a course and a workbook that incorporates financial wellness from the perspective of budgeting systems and from the perspective of understanding financial trauma, how to navigate that trauma, how to overcome that trauma so that you can best use those systems. And I think that it's a really good clash of experiences. I need to stop saying clash. A really good union of experiences and passions, because like I started off by saying, I don't like talking about budgeting, but James does. So I could let him talk about budgeting all day, and I could do my thing and talk about what's happening behind the scenes or under the hood. I also want to shout out everybody that's tuned in. I see a couple of likes coming in from Facebook. I see a comment that came in from YouTube, and we have had a steady audience over here on Instagram. I know that I'm also broadcasting on LinkedIn, so I'm sure that somebody has seen or will see this. And if you missed any portion of this, you can always go back and watch the replay. So James talked a lot about how he ended up specializing. Can't talk today. How he ended up specializing in budgeting, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I ended up specializing in financial trauma specifically, but under the overarching themes of financial psychology and financial therapy. So I started creating content around money in 2019. I started intentionally creating content around money in 2019 when I published my second book, Financially Irresponsible, and then I delivered the TEDx talk. Since then, it's been nothing but content that centers around financial empowerment, which I believe is a state of mind. And in breaking down these ideas around money, I open up my book with chapter 1 being titled, Money is Not the Root of All Evil. So already getting into the crowd of people who are subscribed to this belief that money is the root of all evil, or having money is the root of all evil, or people that have money or the people that pursue money have some kind of evil intention, and breaking that down. So looking at money from a spiritual perspective now. Then I go into what is your attitudes and belief around money, which is closely related into the second part of my book. And then I get into like the part that I find boring, right? The practicality stuff, right? The stuff that you could go on Google and look up that you don't need me here for. And I branded myself as a general financial education person, right? Whether I was calling myself a teacher, whether I was calling myself a coach, whether I was calling myself an expert, whether I allowed other people to call me an expert, it was very basic, very general financial literacy. Soon after that, I decided to niche down into what I had started calling financial empowerment. And that's feeling empowered around your money, right? So that started to get into kind of the, I started talking about the law of attraction and, vibrations and vision boards and manifesting and, all of the stuff that some people consider like the woo woo side of money. And people kind of did that. But I noticed that companies and corporations, sounds like the same thing, slightly different, would jump on the branding train and start calling financial literacy financial empowerment. And I'm like, they're not the same thing, but I can't tell them that. So then I decided to dig deeper and start talking about financial trauma within the last, I want to say maybe a year or two. And now when people who have heard of Rakim Sabri hear the phrase financial trauma, Rakim Sabri is probably the first name that they think of. And I know there's other people in the space certainly who are doing work. And financial trauma is called different things. Like I've heard it called money trauma. I've heard it called a million things. But financial trauma is my thing, especially when we're talking about for people who look like me. And so I have an intro. I opened up with that intro, but my TikTok and Instagram videos open up with I'm Rakim Sabri. I cover financial trauma and financial empowerment for people who look like me. And I hold up my hand so they can see the brown back of my hand so they understand what I'm talking about. And the reason why I specify people who look like me is because our experience with money is unique. It's not something that you can necessarily find in a textbook. And I know this because I'm looking in those textbooks. So as I've dived a little bit more deep into the realm of financial therapy and financial psychology, to validate some of the ideas that I talk about, which include this concept that money is the root of all evil. There is actually work done by financial psychologists, Brad Klontz and his father, that break down money scripts, and that is one of the money scripts that people hold, that money is inherently evil and having money is an evil thing. But at the same time, they want money and they need money so that they can survive. So this creates some internal discord that says, well, I need money, but money's evil. And so how do I reconcile within myself that I want to have and experience a quality of life that requires me to make money? And I didn't know this term money script when I wrote my book, but I realized that the work of this researcher, the psychologist, validates my lived experience. And so currently I'm in the process of studying for a designation that will accredit me as a financial counselor, which is slightly different. I talked about this the last live, so I won't go back into it, but it's slightly different than my role as a financial coach in understanding and allowing my clients to lead the experience of interacting with me with clinical training and education and how that looks. So looking through the textbooks, we talk about cultural disparities and we talk about cultural sensitivity and what I had been calling cultural competence. All of those things are in the textbook, but we're not talking about the lived experience of Black Americans specifically, and what that looks like from the time of slavery up to present. And so I pull from my own research, or rather, I pull from research of somebody else who's not in the financial space, who talks about those experiences from a psychological perspective, from a neurological perspective, in that the trauma of those experiences over time, over generations, is translated through, or rather carried through our DNA, and that we have not had the time or the healing, the therapy needed to navigate those traumas in a way that will prevent it from impacting us in the way that we show up and interact with the world as a whole, but specifically in the way that we show up and interact with money. And so that's where my passion is around this particular topic and how I landed on this topic. My passion for teaching is in my DNA. My passion for speaking is in my DNA. And certainly my passion for personal finance comes from a negative experience with money growing up. So I'm fully loaded on this. As James said, I'm all in on financial trauma, financial therapy, financial psychology. But I do think that it is important rather to talk about the basics, the foundations, the systems. And because my background has been in finance and financial services over the last decade plus, which makes me feel like an old guy in this space now, but a seasoned old guy that I know that I can talk about this with my eyes closed. That's really kind of the foundation for our collaboration on this work. So one more commercial before I plug James back in. We are doing this work. We're coming to you live every Tuesday for the rest of the month, Financial Wellness Month, at 6 p.m. to talk about financial wellness from the perspective of our budgeting systems, how to budget, and everything else that comes with that, and the financial trauma, financial therapy, financial psychology side of things to create awareness around this course and workbook that we're working on. And we've been on James now for 51 minutes and counting. So I want to spend the last 9 minutes giving away something of value. Again, shout out to everybody that's been tuned in for the duration or for a majority of this. And if you missed any portion of this, you can definitely check out the replay. So James, in the last 9 minutes that we might have on this live, can we talk about budgeting systems? So you and I spent some time talking about the different ways that people budget and what ways might be more associated with what generation or age group. And then talk about your favorite way to budget and where you have seen the most client success in terms of budgeting system or budgeting style.
Okay, so I first want to talk about, for those who don't know, the three different budgeting styles that are the most popular, I guess we can say. And the first one is the physical budgeting style. And I kind of mentioned this on the last live, but if you are the type of person who, well, first I want to say you have to choose a budgeting style that works for you. So some people are like, they have to visually write something down for it to be effective for them. And for other people, they like applications, they like things, they're really tech savvy. So these three different budgeting styles are catered for different types of people. So when I talk about the person who is going to be choosing the physical budgeting style, is the type of person who needs a budget planner or a notebook or something where you can write down your expenses, where you can write down your income, and you can visually see where your money is going. And it's all in one physical book. You also have the second type of budgeting style, which is like the spreadsheet budgeting style. So these are for people who like using like Google or Excel documents, or you like using Microsoft Excel sheets or Google Sheets, where you basically go in and input data. So there are a ton of people who like this style of budgeting, but some people like to input information and it really helps them see, okay, here's where I'm spending my money. So you got those type of people for that specific budgeting style. And then you have the mobile application budgeting style. And this, for the people that I work with, seems to work the best for individuals. So there are so many different applications out there that you can use to track your income, your expenses, loans, debt, pretty much everything that you want to be able to track. You can do it through a mobile app, either on your phone or your computer. This personally is my favorite type of budgeting style because I feel that it allows you to keep track of things a little bit more accurately. And so I'll explain what I mean by that. When I go to make a purchase and get groceries, right? As soon as I make that purchase, it happens, it takes place. I may not have like a budget planner like in hand right there when it happens. And I also may not have like this Google spreadsheet to input how much I'm spending at that particular moment. But if I and the thing that you have to be aware of is you cash doesn't really work too well for this. More you want to use if you're using the app, you're going to be using credit cards, debit cards, something that is traceable, basically, for this to be the most effective. So as soon as I make that transaction, as soon as I grab my groceries, that transaction goes into the app and I can instantly see, okay, where am I at? Like, how much have I spent? It subtracts it from my income. It shows me where I'm at for the month as far as for groceries, my grocery budget. So I can see like instantly how my finances are looking. Whereas for the person who is doing the budget planner or you're inputting information, you just have to be a little bit more diligent and take more time to input this information on pretty often to ensure that your budget is accurate. And what I mean by accurate is you just want to make sure that what you have planned to spend versus what you are actually spending, it lines up so that your numbers make sense. I do want to get into something else that's very important. So these budgeting styles are crucial. So now that you selected your budgeting style, you're more likely to check your budget. You're more likely to look into this budget, and I'll also hit the age group. So uh, most most of the older people, I just say maybe 40s. Hopefully, I'm not including anybody. But I would say 40s and up, you're probably more of the physical budget planner. You like to write everything down, be able to look in a notebook. The person who likes to input the on information on the spreadsheets, you're probably really technical and really you probably, I wouldn't say nerdy, but you're really good with technology and you're good with spreadsheets. You may actually do that on your job. Like I know on my job, I actually use spreadsheets, so it's nothing to go in there and just create a quick spreadsheet, throw some numbers in there, and I'll know, how much I'm spending and how much I'm making. Or for the type of person who like does coding, so you need to be very tech savvy to do that. So it can be any age really, but typically those that are under 40 are gonna do that. And then young, like fresh out of high school up into their 40s, typically they like to have something on their phone. At the people who I have worked with, they don't even like the desktop. Like they want the phone. They want to be able to see everything, put their numbers in right then and there. And the cool thing about some of these the applications is as soon as you make a purchase, sometimes it will actually place that transaction into the wrong category. So you can go in there and update your budget, and you can also add some of your financial goals on there, like vacations, birthdays, whatever it may be, so that you're able to see the big picture. And so that's what I want to touch on lastly, is there's a lot going on with your finances. We know that, but in order to get a good grip on your finances, you need to break it up into basically what I like to call 3 different pieces. And that first piece is going to be your income. So just focus solely on what you're bringing in from all different areas, whether it's investments, whether it's paycheck, whether it's side hustles, whether it's you're an entrepreneur and it's kind of coming in randomly. Focus in and really just focus in on your income. Lay all of that information out so you're very crystal clear on what it is you have coming in. Then that's just part one. It's like with budgeting, it's kind of like taking baby steps. You want to focus on just that part one of income. And then your part two is your expenses. And that is a very wide range. So that's debt, credit card payments, subscriptions, typical bills, and any other expenses that you know that are going to be coming out of that income column that you previously already set up. And so you have your income, you have your expenses. Cool. That's part two. So that takes time. That in itself takes a while just to gather all that information and input it into your specific budgeting style, whether that's your planner, whether that's your application, or whether that's in a spreadsheet. That could take probably like 2 to 3 hours, depending on how fast and how organized you've already previously been. And then the third, the most important step out of all of this is to look at those numbers and really see the big picture, because the big picture is your financial goals. It is expense or things that you're planning to do. It's like there's a lot of, so you know what you have coming in, you know what you have going out, but you have these goals and things that you want to do, and that's where priorities take place. That's where real decision making takes place. And so if you don't see the big picture, if you're not able to see how much you have left, or if you don't have any left, you have to be at a when you're taking a look at that big picture, you're then evaluating what's going on with your finances. And so this is huge. Once you know what's going on with your finances, then you can begin making decisions to put yourself in a better situation. But the problem comes into place if you haven't taken that initial step to just do part one, which is know what you have coming in, or part two is to know what you have going out. You're not able to see. You're blind. You're literally blind to everything that's going on with your money. And yes, there are a lot of emotional decisions and a lot of things that you may not see at the moment that Rakim is able to specialize in and describe what's going on there. But all of those things can be slowly, I'm not saying it can be fixed overnight, but with time we can improve those things. But if we're not able to just see the numbers, the facts, and evaluate those facts within your budget, then it's going to be hard to make any progress in our finances. And I think that's what I really want to touch on is, or just kind of conclude with, is when we're talking about financial wellness, we're talking about improving our situations, we got to look at the big picture. And as harsh as it may feel, to realize that, hey, we may not be in the best situation. Our numbers, we may have way more expenses than we have income. But now from there, I'm going to be actively increasing my income, working on my budgeting systems, investing more money, trying all these different things to improve my situation. But you have to start with the first step, and that's literally budgeting 101. It's getting your income and expenses. So
Great points. I'm not going to even try and top that. I think you definitely left the audience with some value. I'm just going to do our very last commercial and let everybody know that next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be back with another installment of this series. We appreciate everybody that has tuned in, everybody that has given us feedback, gave a comment, a shout out, a like, a share. And if you're interested in getting on the wait list for our course/book, definitely drop either one of us a DM or comment on this live stream wherever it is that you're seeing it. Interested or me or something that kind of indicates that you're interested in getting on this list. So we're going to continue to work on it, but James, you did a good job today. I'm going to end the live stream or end the broadcast rather, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
See y'all.